Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katie in Seattle. Here, deep into the dark, the wet dark in Seattle, as we call it. You guys still, from what I can see from afar, pretty nice weather over there.
Yeah, it's been pretty. We've had a really nice autumn. We've been really lucky. Claudia says it's too hot. It's too hot. This isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to be, which, it is worrying sometimes when you think of it that way. But it's definitely been warm and sunny.
I know. I saw a picture of you the other day wearing short sleeves and instantly
Yes.
felt jealous.
Not only that, Katie, but when we went trick-or-treating on Halloween night, I was wearing a short sleeve dress and the lightest of cardigans, like t-shirt thickness cardigan. My lower arms were bare, my legs were bare. When I was not cold at all.
Yeah, that's
and it was
amazing.
nighttime.
Very, very
Yeah.
nice. Very nice. Well, we're not going to be talking about the weather the entire hour, in case you were wondering. We could just go on and on.
We've done an episode on weather before, at least once.
Have we really? I guess that's probably true. I mean, in the course of 11 years, we've probably talked about everything for at least an hour. Okay, but today, as promised, if you listened to last week's show, we're going to talk about for lack of a better way of putting it, the ways that you can miss the nuance of what's going on when you travel and how that can be one of the kind of, I would say, pleasurable things about traveling in a foreign country, a place that you're not familiar with. Of course, last week we were talking about some of the things I noticed, the contrasts coming back from Italy. Every year I noticed certain contrasts, like how much yelling there is in the American airport versus the Italian airport. But today, let's talk about the subtleties that you miss when you're traveling. And of course, that can be a negative thing. We've talked about it in the past as if it was a negative thing. If you go all the way back to season 1 and you listen to our assault episodes, some of those episodes were about missing the subtle nuances in a negative way. But let's talk about it in a positive way. It's something that strikes me immediately upon coming home, too, is how much more you understand about what's going on around you. And I've been traveling to Italy a lot, as you know. I've been to Rome a lot. I've lived in Rome a lot. And so I catch on to things a lot more than I do, say, if I was to go travel in Asia. I might miss a lot more than I do. And yet I still notice how much noisier things are in my head when I re-enter my own home country. And so we're going to tackle that for a bit. Is there anything that immediately pops to mind when I talk to you about the pleasure of missing out on things when you're traveling?
Yes, there are a few things that pop to mind, but I'll get to them first. I want to hear your thoughts first.
Well, one of the things that is especially true if you're traveling in Asia, and for those who've listened to the show a lot know that I used to spend a lot of time traveling in Vietnam. And I guess I think about it in Asia because I don't speak any Asian languages, nor is my language associated with an Asian language. In Italian, for instance, because I speak English, there are words that you can just understand because it's basically, you can see the English word within the Italian word, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, there's a common Latin root.
Exactly. However, when it comes to Asia or traveling in Vietnam or Korea, for instance, you can't even read the signs. You might recognize a Coca-Cola symbol, or you might recognize some of those more iconic symbols, but you can't even read, like, what is the sign telling you? Is it a street direction? Is it an advertisement for something? You have some of the context, but you can't read the words. And it's amazing how quiet things go to a certain degree when you're not being advertised to all the time. And it really makes you realize, like, how much you're being advertised to all the time, just very casually, almost where you don't notice it. You walk by a bus stop, you happen to catch a glimpse of whatever sign. But when you can't read the signs at all, it is this extra quiet, and if you've been to Vietnam, you're like, Vietnam is not a quiet place. It's an incredibly busy place in any of the cities. But yet not being able to read that stuff is so freeing and so incredible that, almost don't want to learn the language for that reason. You know what I mean? Like, it would be so helpful to know some of the language for many other reasons. But part of me goes, I feel like I don't want to learn to read it because then it will just get so much more noisy.
I get that, but I don't think that that's an even trade. Like
Well,
I think I think that I mean obviously learning a new language takes an incredible amount of study and time and patience and all of that. So it's not like you snap your fingers and you can speak a language. But I do think that I do agree with you, but I don't know for me personally if it's as much of a reason. Like I think I would always go for I'd rather have the mental noise and be able to speak the language as opposed to the opposite. At least if I'm going to stay there for a long period of time. Obviously, if I'm just passing through, then I suppose there's no need to learn the language. Although my, little language obsessed brain is like, I want to learn every language. And
right.
every time I travel, my Duolingo has like I opened it, I'm like, how many languages have I got in here? How many languages did I start at one time? I'm like, Irish. I have no memory of starting to learn Irish. And so unless that was Aurelio, I'm not sure. I want to, every time I go to a new country, I'm like, oh my God, I want to learn this language.
Well, to be fair, when I was traveling in Vietnam all the time, I did try to learn certain phrases, but it is still to this day the hardest language I've ever attempted to say anything in. I think I've told you my kind of funny story because I used to travel with this man named Bin Nguyen who was from there and could speak Vietnamese perfectly, as you would as a native. And he would be quizzing me on how to say thank you. And I would say it. It's something like, and I'm going to say it wrong, it's something like Karm, and I'm sorry to all our
Okay.
Vietnamese listeners, Karm Arn. Okay. And that's pronounced
Okay.
wrong. It's like Karm, but swallowed, arm, but swallowed. Okay. And I would say that, and he would say, that's right. And then I would say it again, and you're like, no, that's not right. And to me, it sounded almost exactly
Exactly
the
the
same.
same.
And even still, you can see that I'm like, I can't remember exactly what it should be. And, and I did not feel I had that same problem going to Japan and learning to say thank you. I got arigato fine. But for whatever reason, the pronunciation of thank you in Vietnamese was something that was beyond me. And that's like the entry point to,
Yeah.
functioning in a country. It just, is such a hard language. So impressed with people who can speak it. But anyway, I mean, it's more than that, though. I mean, I think some of the subtle nuances, I think one of the things that is the most freeing, but it can be a dangerous, I guess, if you aren't careful about it, is that you don't know the cultural context of things. And you know all those cultural contexts around your own home country. You can't be an American and, well, I suppose you can be an American and not know, but you should know about the history of slavery in this country and the context that adds to like the social engagement. But if you travel to another country where you really don't know much of anything at all, maybe you've done a little bit of research, you don't know all the like subtle context. And I'm thinking of a particular example where back when we used to travel in Vietnam a lot, we were friendly with a lot of kids that were kind of referred to as the postcard sellers. They were the kids who were selling various things in the streets. They didn't always sell postcards, but postcards were one of their main things. They also sold, if they were younger, they would sell gum or candy. Some of them would sell books. But either way, they were like the kids that come up to you, that trail you around, that try to get you to buy things from them. And rather than just sort of ignore them like a lot of tourists do, we became friendly with them over the years. Some of them very friendly with, like we knew them very well and we knew their families and all that stuff. And that was a deliberate choice. But that said, there was one kid who was on crutches and who was a bookseller. And for whatever reason, the other kids did not like this kid. They would make fun of him. They would cause him lots of problems. And I didn't have the context for why they didn't like this kid. And so I just, not knowing the context and not really caring, to be honest, I was just as kind to that kid as I was to all the other kids. And I think that is part of it. It's like it removes some of the preconceived judgments that you might have going around in day-to-day life. You can't read the situation. Maybe this kid had stolen from them 1,000 times. I don't know. Or maybe they just hated him because he was disabled and honestly probably gay. but I don't know. I have no context of like why they didn't like this kid. And I was like, well, just because they don't like him doesn't mean I don't have to like him because I don't know, you know? So I'm going to just hang out just as I hang out with the rest of them. And I think that is also a privilege is you just sort of come to people as they are without any of the layers
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
are built in. Internal prejudices maybe that you don't even realize you have or you know the wariness that you might have in certain situations. And that's why it can be dangerous also. Like you can be like too open and not wary enough. But I like to think of it also as a privilege.
That's interesting. I've never thought about it that way. When you first started talking about the postcard sellers, it kind of, and this particular, it made me think of the Rom community in Italy. And a lot of foreigners, when they're in Italy, they see people playing music on the street and they think that they are Italian street musicians and that they're playing Italian folk music. And people like Claudio, sort of hardened, cynical, like people who've lived in Italy all their lives, they see those people playing music outside a restaurant and they just roll their eyes and they think, these people are thieves during the day. And I mean, quite frankly, they most likely are. Just, just going by statistics, they're thieves during the day, they're on the metro, and then maybe at night they go and they play some music outside a restaurant and it's definitely not Italian music. It has nothing to do with Italian culture. And, all these tourists are just, they're totally blind and they have no idea and they're just giving them money. So that's how Claudio sees it. And, a lot of tourists might say, especially if you're coming from your point of view, hey, I enjoyed it. They didn't do anything wrong to me. I gave them a couple bucks because it felt like a typical picturesque moment to be sitting outside and having my Italian dinner and having some guy or woman serenade me on a guitar or on an accordion, and I enjoyed it. So I can see that. I mean, I probably fall somewhere in the middle of those two ways of looking at it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you also, I guess you do have some of the context about like these people might also rob you. However, like, you also have the context of like why would they rob you? They've been like kept on the margins forever. Like they have to do certain things to survive. Just like these postcard seller kids. They might rob you too, but they've also been kept on the margins of society. People have to like find a way to survive. And that's another
Yeah,
thing.
I would say that is debatable in Italian culture because in it, the Italian government tries very hard to integrate the Rom community. They actively try to get the kids enrolled in school. They're not subject to the same laws. They will not serve time the way that an Italian would for the same thing. And and unfortunately, not the fault of the children, but they're often just like straight up raised in that way. And there are exceptions. There are definitely exceptions of kids who end up being allowed by their parents to go to school and having a different life. But for the vast majority of them, they're not given that option. They're drugged from the time that they're babies. They're passed around from person to person and used as a tool to get more donations, more money. And they have very, very little choice. And I mean, there's definitely shades of gray there, but I think it's more of a it's like more of a systemic internal problem. I really think that the Italian government does try to help the situation.
Do you
That's just my view of it.
so is that a context that you wish you didn't have?
Um, I don't know. I don't know that it That's a good question. I don't know. I've never thought about it that way. I think that anytime you see a child begging or stealing, if you're a intelligent person, you know that it's not their fault. So
Yeah.
I think that I would never blame a child, no matter whether I knew their backstory or not, because you know that a child, if they had a choice, would not be go walking up the metro all day long.
Right.
But I do think it does help to know because I think a lot of people feel like a lot of guilt, a lot of tourists feel a lot of guilt that they need to give money to the Rom beggars that they encounter. And a lot of times people are kind of pushed into it. And I think that it does help me to know that whatever money I give a mom or somebody who looks like a mom who's sitting on the ground with a baby, she's not going to keep that money. You know, that's going to go to the racket. And the more she brings in, the more likely they are to send her out the next day. So I think that I am kind of glad I have that perspective on it
Mm-hmm.
because it's not like, oh my gosh, I really want to help this person. If I do, then I'll buy them a sandwich. Like I'd rather do that.
Mm-hmm.
Something that they're not going to be able to take back to the head honcho of the whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, tell me about a time when you've enjoyed not knowing exactly what was going on around you.
Um, well, you know, it's for me, it's like I think about it. I could definitely probably sit and think about it in terms of places I've gone as a true tourist. But what's actually coming to mind are like things in Italy. And obviously, I'm not a tourist, and I have a much deeper understanding of things here in Italy than a tourist would. But I don't have 100% understanding because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't grow up here. Even though I've lived here a long time, I didn't grow up here. And I think that does make a huge difference.
Yes.
And I think if Aurelio were to move to the States at 26, he would not get a lot of the American stuff because he didn't grow up there.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just thinking about, first of all, just like a lot of political stuff. Like you know, when you're like you see a political Instagram reel or something from your own country, and you know, whichever side of the issue you're on, you just totally get it. You just know what they're talking about, and you know if there's a person talking, let's say a politician, you're going to have an opinion on whether that person is full of crap or not. You know, you're going to be like, yeah, that person is totally BSing because in reality they did this, this, and that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that for Italian politicians. Like I know a couple of Italian politicians, you know, just like the main players. I don't know anything about the members of parliament. I don't know anything about really about the, you know, mayors, stuff like this. Like I could watch an Instagram political reel of Italian politics and kind of be a little bit naive about it and take people at their face value.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's a positive thing or not, but it kind of is a positive because then you're not like getting all upset about it and all angry and all indignant, which is what happens to me when I watch American political stuff. I just get all riled up. And here I'm just like, that could be true, could be not true.
But
Who knows?
but I mean that said, I think that there are probably 20 somethings, teens listening to this right now who don't know much about politics because they haven't picked up an interest in it, or even people in their 30s and 40s and 50s who just don't pay any attention.
True.
You know, and so it could equally be that you haven't like dedicated any attention to it since you've gotten there. Like that was not something that you were interested in, you know.
Yeah, I could, after all of this time, I could definitely be more up on Italian politics. And I'm not going to say I know absolutely nothing, but you know, I don't. But yes, I could have paid more attention, but there's something like you were saying. There's like this deep cultural sort of understanding of a place that you get from just being from there. And, you know, I don't think that I'll ever 100% have it for Italy.
Yeah,
And
that's
um,
interesting.
yeah, and like, you know, how you were saying, you know, Americans should all understand, you know, some basic facts about slavery and about American history to be able to be fair, really, in, you know, in society as it is today. And I think that there's similar things in Italian history that I might maybe I know a little bit about, but I don't have a
Mm-hmm.
deep understanding of it. Like all the colonialism that Italy was involved in Africa and you know, all the fascism. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in Italian history that I know a bit about, but I definitely don't have the like deep lived understanding of.
Yeah, and how it's still today shaping society and how it behaves. That deeper context. Yeah. I mean, you've been traveling a lot in Japan lately, I feel.
Well,
And
I mean, I went one time.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, you were there with your husband and your son. And while you were there, they were involved in a program. They were in like a karate program for part of the time you were there. So you did have some free time. I know you were watching them from time to time. But, you know, any like, you know, I don't know, pleasure walking around and just sort of like hearing different things. Like we talked a month or so ago about you taking vacation and being surrounded by Italians. I mean, going to Japan and being surrounded by Japanese culture is such a different thing from an auditory level, from a visual level, you know.
I guess I mean, I don't know that it's the same as what you're talking about. I don't think that I've ever sat and had the thought, wow, I love the fact that I don't understand the advertising. I don't think that I ever that ever crossed my mind.
That
What I
surprises me,
love,
actually. It surprises me so much. That's one of the
really?
joys of traveling and not
Do
being.
you did you come to that on your own or did like somebody point that out to you?
No, I came to that on my own, but I've asked, like, even on this last trip when I asked Derek about it, and he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, I think about that every time we're out of the States, like how great it is to miss some of the advertising.
I
To
don't know.
interrupt your thought, but I mean, even so, like, you know how they do these dynamic insertion ads on podcasts now.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in Italy and the podcasts I listen to downloads in Italy, all the ads are in Italian. The fact that, you almost can like screen it out a little bit more, because I mean, for me, I understand enough Italian where I'm understanding much of the words and the context, but it's not the same as like some broy dude from America talking to me about Samsung, like I'm able to screen it out in a way
Uh-huh.
that is pleasurable. And so as soon as I got back to like being in the States long enough that now my podcasts are downloading these American ads again, I'm irritated again. So
I think I would guess like the difference is that when you go to Italy, you're spending a good amount of time there and you're not really doing much touristy stuff. You're working basically.
true.
Or you're just hanging out and going to places that you know. And I think that therefore you're almost like a short-term expat in a way. You're there, you're doing regular daily stuff. You're getting up every morning. You have some kind of commute, even if it's a walk. Like you're doing, you have a routine.
Yeah.
You're going to the supermarket.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas when I was in Tokyo, I'm getting up, I'm looking at the guidebook, I'm deciding what are we going to do today? How are we going to get there on the metro? It's like I've got so many tourist focused things in my mind that I don't have the sort of openness in my schedule almost to pick up the regular ordinary daily life things
Mm-hmm.
on such a short trip. I think you need a little more time to even have the time to be aware of something like that. At least for me, I never think about ads. I mean, maybe because I don't, when I'm in a hotel, like I would never turn on the TV, for example.
Yeah. Well,
And
maybe,
just
or
like,
maybe it's that your country, Italy, isn't advertising to you as much as the US
it could
is.
be. It could be. I also don't watch TV. I am on social media. So I do get ads. I know we have billboards here for sure. But yeah, I think it must be that. Maybe that's what the difference is.
Yeah. I just had one more thought, just like thinking back to like being in the streets of Vietnam with my dad and like having that lack of context is, of course, and same with you talking about the people who beg for money in Rome. Obviously, that begging, and I think it's something, hopefully, we all know that is like an affect. That is, yes, the person might be in a dire situation, but it's often kind of accentuated, in a way. And my dad was always kind of about how do you give that person back the normal human interaction if they spend their entire day begging these people for money, asking for money. Like, how do you break them out of that so that you actually have a real moment of human engagement? And my dad would sometimes do it just by in like a joking manner. And I remember so vividly, and maybe we've talked about it on the show, but there was this man who was begging on the street of Vietnam and, oh, so sorrowful, so sorrowful. And he had a little bit of change in his hand and he was asking for money. And my dad walked by and took the change out of his hand. And the guy immediately snapped out of the moaning and groaning and was like, "Hey, and and my dad says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were offering me money." And he gives him the money back and he's like, "Oh, you were asking me for money. Oh, I'm so sorry. I totally misunderstood." And the man laughed and laughed and my dad like gave him money instead, but they just sort of had this laughing exchange, and I was just like, "Oh, it's so great how my dad was able to break that person out to who he actually is, in normal life." It was like this moment of levity where they're both laughing really hard at the exchange.
Hmm.
Maybe, not knowing the whole context, like, for instance, like not knowing the whole background of the of the Roma, or what do you call them? The Rome? I always think of them as the
Ro-
Roma, but
I think you Roma or Rom community.
yeah,
Either. Roma is fine too.
is yes, they're a part of this larger thing, but like, if you look at my dad's example, they're also people who are like stuck doing this stuff, So how do you like engage with them in a way that accentuates their humanity also? And that I do not know. When it comes to that community in Rome. I have no idea how they would react to if you joked around with them more like that. But I guess, part of the context of not knowing is you just try something, see what happens. And if the person thinks it's funny, great. And if they don't, you can be like, oh, sorry, here's $5, my bad. I don't know. It's something to think about for sure.
I do have one other thought that popped up while you were talking.
Okay.
And this isn't so much about what I notice or don't notice. It's more about like, as someone who's a foreigner, even though I'm not, even though I'm technically not a foreigner anymore,
Right.
I have the privilege of being able to be a little bit more abrupt or brusque with people because I do not have the complete mastery of the language. Now, I speak Italian very well. I would say I'm fluent, but it's still not my language. And I cannot speak it perfectly, and I cannot sometimes say exactly what I want to say with the exact nuances of the language that I would like to. And I also cannot speak with the same level of courtesy and politeness that a native Italian could. You don't think about it at first, but it gets you off the hook for a lot of stuff. And I mean, not that it gets you off the hook. That's maybe not the right way of saying it, but like I'm allowed to say things in a ruder way. And people forgive me for this. When I was thinking about it was someone was telling me a story about how some guy was harassing her, not harassing in a bad way, but just someone was saying something really rude to her at the gym, some dude. I would have just ignored him. Like I would have just not talked to him. And I'm like, would you have been able to do that in America? Would you have felt like you could totally ignore someone and not respond to them in the States? Because here I feel like I can always, first of all, I can always play the I don't understand you card, or I don't understand you enough, or I can't really tell you, I can't engage with you. I just can't engage with you. So if I
Yeah.
don't want to engage with someone, I don't have to.
Right.
And I mean, I guess nobody does if they don't want to, but it's easier. Like I have this sort of, like I said, I have this carte blanche to ignore people or to just be rude to people if if I feel the need for it. And I'm not going around trying to be rude to people, but it's nice. And also, like with my father-in-law, and we've talked about him on the show quite a bit, but he can be very pushy. And he is also extremely, he's very old school. And so he uses that very antiquated, overly florid, overly courteous Italian language. And I'm just not capable of doing that. And sometimes when he's being pushy with me, I just have this way of sort of shutting it down in a very like brusque, like, I'm just an American. Like I can't do this dance with you, this back and forth, like, let's see who can be politer than the other while like not trying to do what they don't want to do sort of game.
Right.
I'm just going to say, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. I think a lot of women, particularly, they go through life like trying to get to the point where they can just be like, sorry, it's not happening, just saying no when they want to say no and not offering any explanations for it. It's something that people pleasers struggle with. And I feel like when I'm in Italy, I'm just so good at it because I don't have the language.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's like, no, that doesn't work for me. Or no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't need to go into why.
And whether or not they think you're rude, it doesn't really matter.
I know my father-in-law has thought me rude on occasion, probably on many occasions, but I have made my peace with that.
Yeah, and I think like the opposite here in the US, I would be interested to hear from some people who live here in the US as immigrants or expats who don't speak the language as well, because I wonder if you're doing the same thing that Tiffany's describing. I mean, because one of the, I don't know, strange things about being an expat or an immigrant here in the US is that some percentage of American citizens are going to think like if you don't speak perfect English that you're not very smart, which is so dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, not to be rude, but like given how hard we all know it is to learn another language, let alone like operate in it every day. And I say this as a person who has a lot of trouble learning languages, and I'm sure come off as completely daft in Italy. I mean, I vividly still remember being in Mexico after studying Spanish in high school for years, and the guy asking me as I'm struggling to speak to this shop owner, with just like digging in the treasure trove of what limited vocabulary I have. And after we have this awkward conversation where I'm trying to like make some kind of sense, he says to me, "How long have you been here?" And I said, 2 years. No. Instead of 2 days.
2 days.
And then I didn't, and he gave me the most puzzled look, and I didn't realize until after I'd left the shop that I had said years instead of days. And I was like, oh my gosh, that guy must think I'm an idiot. Like, I've been here 2 years and I'm like had that bad of a conversation with you. Wow. And I still am embarrassed about it to this day. But I think that context is very strange because it's like, it's hard to learn English, it's really hard to learn English. And I always think like, gosh, if anybody is speaking English and another language, these people are brilliant that they're able to function so well in society, because I certainly cannot do the same. Stick me in Vietnam for a year, I probably still won't be able to say thank you by the end of that year.
I'm sure you would.
Maybe, but half the time they'd be like, nope, that's not right. Well, all right. Well, we can leave it there. Feel free to write in with your stories because I'd love to hear some of what you think of this topic, about nuance, about the difficulties of conversations, about the privilege of not knowing exactly what's going on around you from time to time. You can always email us bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media. We're mostly on Instagram now, but also Facebook. Just look for the Bittersweet Life Podcast.
Yeah, and make sure, if you haven't already, to join us over on our Patreon because we put out 2 bonus episodes every single month and we don't go on break. When we sometimes go on break on the main show, like in August or at Christmas, we never go on break for our Patreon supporters. So if you don't know what Patreon is, you're like, what the heck is that? It is, how would you describe it, Katie? It's a platform in which you can support people like us.
Yeah, it's a way to support a show that you love by basically paying $5 a month or more, which helps us pay the bills associated with the show. And then you get bonus content as well. So it's kind of like a win-win situation.
Yeah, it definitely is. And we do so many fun episodes over there, kind of quirky, off-topic episodes, sometimes very personal episodes. This past week, we did an episode about how I was attempting to do a self-video ban, and not watch any video content for the foreseeable future. We're going to have to do an update on that, Katie,
Okay,
but
can't wait.
maybe next time.
And like last month in October, we talked about some pretty enormous news.
Yeah.
Very enormous news. And by the way, I want to thank all of you who have sent responses to that enormous news. I'm not going to say what it is on the show, the main show, but I've gotten so many nice messages and multiple cards in the mail, which I am so pleased by. Thank you, those of you who sent me a card. That was so sweet. So anyway, if you want to know what the enormous news is, you're going to have to join us over on Patreon. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to patreon.com/the Bittersweet Life Podcast. And I promise you, it's not as confusing as it sounds. All right, well, we'll leave it there. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye. It's rare to find a podcast that has aired for over a decade, but this podcast is one, and you can be a sponsor of it, reaching a loyal group of engaged and thoughtful people who relish travel, new experiences, and lifelong learning. Get the conversation started by visiting the support tab at thebittersweetlife.net.